When a man is secretly into you, one of the earliest and most revealing shifts you'll notice is not what he says, but how intentional his attention becomes. This is important because attraction doesn't usually announce itself loudly at first. It reveals itself through consistency. Casual interest is reactive. It shows up when it's convenient, when there's nothing better happening, or when boredom creates an opening. But genuine interest has direction. It moves toward you with purpose, even when no one is watching and nothing is being gained in the moment. You'll feel this intentionality in the small things. He remembers details you mentioned once, not because he's trying to impress you, but because your life has begun to matter to him. He follows up on conversations days later, asks how something turned out, or references a thought you shared in passing. Psychologically, this matters because attention is one of our most limited resources. We don't give sustained, thoughtful attention to things that don't carry emotional weight. When a man starts investing his attention this way, it's because you've crossed an invisible line in his mind, from someone he enjoys to someone he cares about. What's especially telling is that this attention isn't performative. He's not suddenly grand or over the top. Instead, he becomes reliable. He shows up when he says he will. He responds with presence, not just speed. There's a difference between fast replies and meaningful ones. Someone who likes you more than a friend doesn't just reply quickly, he replies with substance. He engages. He builds on the conversation rather than letting it die. That's emotional effort, and emotional effort is never accidental. Philosophically, this is where attraction intersects with values. When a man is into you, you become part of how he organizes his priorities. You're no longer an afterthought squeezed into the margins of his life. Even in a busy schedule, he creates space. Not because he has unlimited time, but because interest rearranges importance. This is why you'll often notice that he initiates contact without a clear reason. He doesn't always need an excuse. The connection itself becomes the reason. This also explains why mixed signals are rarely as confusing as we think. When attention is inconsistent, it usually reflects uncertainty or convenience, not hidden desire. True interest simplifies things. It may not be labeled yet, but it feels steady, and that steadiness creates a subtle sense of emotional safety. You don't feel like you're chasing clarity because his behavior already communicates it. The deeper insight here is this: people don't drift into deep interest. They choose it through repeated micro-decisions. Each message, each follow-up, each moment of presence is a quiet vote for connection. When those votes add up, they reveal far more than words ever could. So if you were paying attention, you don't need to decode every text or analyze every pause. Watch where his attention goes when he has nothing to gain. Because in the end, intentional attention is the clearest evidence of interest, and recognizing that allows you to stop guessing and start responding from a place of confidence and self-respect. When a man is secretly into you, one of the most underestimated signs isn't flirtation or chemistry, but the way he prioritizes emotional safety. Before romance becomes obvious, before attraction is ever named, he creates an environment where you feel at ease being fully yourself. This matters because real interest isn't driven by the urge to impress. It's driven by the desire to connect, and connection requires safety. You'll notice this in how he listens, not the kind of listening where someone waits for their turn to speak, but the kind where your words actually land. He doesn't rush to fix your problems or redirect the conversation back to himself. Instead, he allows space for your thoughts and emotions to exist without judgment. Psychologically, this signals something important. When a man is emotionally invested, your inner world becomes relevant to him. He's not just responding to you, he's receiving you. This emotional presence often shows up in moments that have nothing to do with attraction on the surface. You might share a frustration, a fear, or even something you're embarrassed to admit, and instead of distancing himself, he leans in. He validates your experience, not necessarily because he agrees with everything you say, but because he respects your perspective. That respect is foundational. It's what separates someone who is curious about you from someone who is committed to understanding you from a philosophical standpoint. Emotional safety is the bridge between attraction and trust. Desire alone doesn't sustain connection, trust does. And when a man is secretly into you, he's often more concerned with not violating that trust than with accelerating intimacy. This is why some men seem slower, more careful, or even hesitant when their feelings are real. The stakes feel higher. He doesn't want to say the wrong thing, push too far, or disrupt the bond that's forming. What's subtle here is that this safety is not passive. He actively creates it through consistency, patience, and emotional regulation. He doesn't disappear when conversations get real. He doesn't mock vulnerability or deflect with sarcasm. Instead, he shows emotional maturity by staying grounded when things go deeper. That steadiness sends a powerful, often unconscious message: you're safe with me. This also explains why emotional safety often precedes romantic tension rather than following it. When you feel seen and accepted, attraction has room to grow naturally. There's less anxiety, less performance, and more authenticity. And ironically, this authenticity is what makes chemistry stronger, not weaker. For anyone trying to interpret mixed signals, this is a crucial recalibration. Flirting can be a game. Attention can be fleeting. But emotional safety requires effort, empathy, and self-awareness. It's not something people fake for long, because it demands real presence. When a man consistently offers this, he's already emotionally invested, whether he's admitted it yet or not. So the question isn't just whether he's attracted to you. The deeper question is whether he makes it easier for you to be yourself around him. Because when someone creates safety before passion, they're not just interested in a moment, they're interested in meaning. And recognizing that allows you to lean into connections that are built not on uncertainty, but on trust. When a man is secretly into you, one of the most revealing indicators isn't what he claims to feel, but how his behavior subtly shifts when you're present compared to when you're not. Attraction has a way of changing people before they ever decide to change themselves. It shows up in unconscious adjustments, tone, posture, energy, and attention that are difficult to fake and even harder to sustain without genuine feeling. You might notice that he becomes more attentive in your presence. His body language opens up. He turns toward you when you speak, mirrors your movements, or maintains eye contact just a little longer than necessary. These are not rehearsed signals. Psychologica. Lie, they're the result of heightened focus. When someone matters to us, our nervous system prioritizes them. We orient ourselves physically toward what we value, often without realizing we're doing it. Beyond body language, there's a shift in emotional availability. Around others, he may be casual, playful, or even distracted. Around you, he becomes more engaged, more thoughtful. He asks deeper questions. He pauses before responding. There's a sense that he's choosing his words more carefully, not because he's trying to impress, but because he's invested in how you receive them. This carefulness is important. It signals that your perception of him matters, and that's a hallmark of attraction moving beyond surface level interest. Another subtle difference appears in how he manages his energy. With friends, he may be relaxed or indifferent about timing and follow through. With you, he's more reliable. He shows up when he says he will. He remembers commitments. This isn't about perfection, it's about priority. When someone is emotionally drawn to you, they instinctively protect the version of themselves you experience. Consistency becomes a form of self-expression. From a philosophical perspective, this behavioral shift reflects identity alignment. When a man is into you, he begins to integrate you into how he sees himself. Your presence activates a more intentional version of him. He wants to be seen clearly because being seen by you carries weight. This is why his behavior around you often feels more grounded, more present, and sometimes even more restrained. He's not performing, he's calibrating. What's important here is that these differences are contextual, not dramatic. They don't announce themselves with grand gestures or obvious declarations. In fact, many women miss them because they're looking for overt signs rather than comparative ones. The real insight comes from observing patterns. How does he behave with you versus how he behaves with others? Who gets the unfiltered attention? Who gets the consistency? This distinction also helps dissolve confusion around mixed signals. A man can be charming with everyone, but consistency is selective. When he treats you differently in ways that involve effort, presence, and reliability, that difference is meaningful. It suggests that you occupy a distinct category in his emotional landscape, even if he hasn't named it yet. The deeper lesson is this: attraction doesn't just change how someone feels, it changes how they show up. And when you start noticing that a man becomes more attentive, more intentional, and more present around you than anyone else, you're not imagining things. You're witnessing the quiet evidence of emotional interest. The power comes from trusting what you observe and responding with clarity and self-respect, rather than waiting for words that may arrive later than the truth already has. When a man is secretly into you, one of the clearest indicators is how he invests his time when there's no immediate payoff. This is where attraction moves from surface-level interest into something far more meaningful. Anyone can show up when there's excitement, validation, or obvious reward on the table. What reveals real interest is what someone does when there's nothing to gain except the experience of being with you. You'll notice that he's willing to linger. Conversations don't feel rushed or transactional. He doesn't constantly steer things toward an outcome or a result. Instead, he's present in the moment, even if the moment is ordinary. Psychologically, this matters because time is our most non-renewable resource. We instinctively protect it, and we rarely give it freely unless something or someone feels worth the investment. This kind of time investment often shows up in quiet, unremarkable ways. He'll talk with you late into the night without checking the clock. He'll help you think through a problem that has nothing to do with him. He'll sit with you in uncertainty rather than trying to rush the interaction toward clarity or closure. These behaviors signal patience, and patience is one of the strongest markers of genuine interest. Desire wants immediacy. Care is willing to wait. From a philosophical perspective, this willingness to invest time without reward reflects a deeper orientation toward connection rather than consumption. When a man is casually interested, he tends to measure interactions by what they deliver: attention, excitement, or affirmation. When he's genuinely into you, the interaction itself becomes the value. He doesn't need it to lead somewhere right away. Being with you is already enough. This is also why you'll often see him make space in a busy life. Not because his schedule suddenly became lighter, but because priorities quietly rearranged themselves. He finds windows where none seemed to exist before. He chooses presence over efficiency, and that choice is rarely conscious. Attraction has a way of reorganizing our internal hierarchy without us ever sitting down to plan it. It's important to distinguish this kind of investment from overgiving or self-sacrifice. Healthy interest doesn't mean he neglects his life or abandons his boundaries. Instead, it shows up as consistency. He doesn't disappear when things are calm. He doesn't only show up when something exciting is happening. He remains engaged across emotional seasons, which is far more revealing than intensity in isolated moments. This insight is particularly powerful because it cuts through confusion. Many people mistake intensity for interest and busyness for distance. But intensity can be short-lived, and busyness is often just a convenient. Explanation. Time tells the truth. If someone repeatedly chooses to share it with you, especially when there's no obvious benefit, they're communicating value in the most honest way possible. The deeper lesson here is not just about reading his behavior, but about honoring your own standards. When you begin to recognize time as a form of emotional currency, you stop chasing attention and start observing investment. You stop asking how much someone likes you and start noticing how much they show up. Because in the end, interest isn't proven by words or promises, but by presence. And when someone consistently chooses to be there without needing anything in return, they are revealing exactly where you stand in their life. And that clarity gives you the confidence to respond with intention rather than uncertainty. When a man is secretly into you, another subtle but powerful shift takes place. He becomes protective of the connection you share, not in a controlling or possessive way, but in a way that signals emotional attachment. This kind of protectiveness isn't about ownership, it's about care. It's the instinct to preserve something that feels meaningful before it's even been defined. You'll notice this first in his awareness. He picks up on changes in your mood more quickly than others do. If you're quieter than usual, he checks in. If something feels off, he doesn't ignore it or brush past it. Psychologically, this matters because attentiveness to emotional shifts requires empathy and investment. We don't monitor the emotional climate of connections that don't matter to us. When he notices, it's because the state of the bond affects him. This protectiveness also shows up in how he handles situations that could disrupt the connection. He's more careful with his words. He avoids unnecessary conflict. He doesn't casually disappear after moments of closeness. Even if he doesn't articulate what the connection is, he behaves as though it's fragile in the best possible way, something to be handled with intention rather than carelessness. That caution isn't fear, it's value. From a philosophical standpoint, this is where attraction turns into responsibility. The moment someone begins to care about the impact of their behavior on another person, they've crossed an internal threshold. He's no longer acting solely from impulse. He's considering consequence. That shift is profound. It means your emotional experience has entered his decision-making process. You may also notice a subtle change in how he reacts to the presence of others, particularly potential rivals. This doesn't necessarily look like jealousy or confrontation. Often it's quieter than that. He may become more engaged when other men are mentioned, ask questions he wouldn't normally ask, or subtly reassert his presence in your life. This isn't about competition, it's about significance. When a man is emotionally invested, he becomes aware that the connection matters and doesn't want it diluted or overlooked. Importantly, healthy protectiveness respects your autonomy. He doesn't try to control your choices or isolate you. Instead, he supports you, encourages you, and wants to be someone you feel safe turning to. He doesn't position himself as your savior, but as your ally. That distinction is crucial. Real interest doesn't shrink your world, it wants to be part of it. This is also why he may show concern for your well-being in practical ways. He checks if you got home safely, he remembers things that stress you out, and tries not to add to that load. He offers help without making it transactional. These gestures are small, but they're revealing. They reflect a mindset that says, what happens to you matters to me, even if he hasn't said those words out loud. What's powerful here is that this kind of protectiveness often exists before any label does. It's pre-verbal. It lives in behavior, not declarations. And because it's subtle, many people dismiss it or underestimate its significance. But emotionally, it's one of the clearest signs that someone is already attached. The deeper takeaway is this. When a man starts protecting the connection, he's already invested in its future, whether he's consciously aware of it or not. And recognizing that allows you to stop questioning your intuition and start honoring it. Because when someone treats the bond as something worth safeguarding, they're telling you without words that what you share already matters. When a man is secretly into you, one of the most misunderstood signs is hesitation. Many people assume that if someone truly cares, they will move quickly, decisively, and without doubt. But in reality, the opposite is often true. When the emotional stakes are high, behavior becomes more measured, not more impulsive. What looks like caution on the surface is often care operating beneath it. You'll notice this hesitation in how he approaches defining the connection. He may avoid rushing into labels, not because he lacks interest, but because he's aware of what's at risk. The bond already matters to him, and that makes him careful. Psychologically, this makes sense. When something feels significant, we slow down to avoid damaging it. Recklessness is easy when there's nothing to lose. Care is what emerges when there is. This caution also shows up in his communication. He thinks before he speaks. He may revisit conversations in his mind, wondering how he came across or whether he said the right thing. He's more sensitive to your reactions, more attuned to shifts in your tone or energy. This isn't insecurity, it's investment. When a man doesn't care, he doesn't reflect. When he does care, he becomes self-aware. From a philosophical perspective, hesitation reveals perceived value. We don't hesitate over things that are disposable. We hesitate when choices feel irreversible or meaningful. In this sense, his carefulness is evidence that you've moved beyond being a casual presence in his life. You've become someone whose opinion, presence, and emotional experience matter enough to influence his behavior. This also explains why some men seem paradoxical when they're deeply interested. They show up consistently, invest time and attention, create safety and protect the connection, yet they pause when it comes to taking the final step forward. That pause is not indifference. It's the moment where desire meets responsibility. He's weighing not just what he wants, but what the relationship could become. It's important not to confuse this kind of hesitation with emotional unavailability. The difference lies in consistency. An unavailable man disappears, avoids depth, and withholds effort. A man who cares but hesitates remains present. He stays engaged. He doesn't retreat when things get real. He simply moves with intention rather than urgency. The present stays steady even if the pace slows. This insight is especially valuable because it reframes how you respond. Instead of trying to push for certainty or force clarity, you gain power by observing alignment. Are his actions matching his care? Is the connection growing in depth even if it's moving carefully? When the answer is yes, patience becomes a strategic choice rather than a passive one. At its core, this kind of hesitation is about respect for you, for the connection, and for the potential of what could be built. He doesn't want to mishandle something that already feels meaningful, and that awareness, even when unspoken, is one of the strongest indicators that his feelings run deeper than friendship. So the final reflection is this: don't measure interest solely by speed or boldness. Measure it by thoughtfulness, consistency, and care. Because when someone moves carefully, not because they're unsure, but because they care, they're telling you something powerful. And recognizing that allows you to meet the moment with confidence, clarity, and the self-respect to choose connections that honor both your heart and your future.